All right, we're back with you again. I'm here with Pastor Alonzo from Church of God Church here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Cisco Walker, an evangelist here in the International District. And we're continuing on with our clips from movies and films. And tonight we're going to talk about a clip that comes from Monster that Netflix did on Jeffrey Dahmer. This one is entitled Dahmer Prison Chapel Retribution. And so it's important for us to look at these things, as difficult as they are, attempt to take them apart and see what was going on. So you saw the clip. It shows Dahmer in the prison chapel. And one of the questions that always comes up with subject matter like this is, was Jeffrey Dahmer simply engaging in what cynics refer to as jailhouse religion? You know, jailhouse religion is a psychological phenomenon. Many, it seems, find Jesus when they are incarcerated, but they fail to bear fruit, sadly, once they are released. And so this is kind of a question that's always on people's minds when they see a serial killer, a psychopath, a sadist, a sociopath who wanders into the chapel of a prison chapel. I've preached in prison chapels, and so have you, and they can be awful places, but they can also be good places. So was Dahmer simply engaging in what cynics call jailhouse religion?
You know, without knowing Dahmer's heart, it would be impossible to tell.
Yeah.
Some of the work that I did to get ready for this topic was I made as much of my way through Jeremy Renner's portrayal of Jeffrey Dahmer, a movie from, I think, 2003 or so. It was difficult to watch.
Terrible.
I watched chunks of Monster, the Netflix Jeffrey Dahmer story. It was just really difficult to get through. You know, we can find ourselves in three different places at the risk of oversimplification. We either believe that, you know, people like Jeffrey Dahmer can be saved. We don't think that people like Jeffrey Dahmer can be saved, or we don't care whether or not people like Jeffrey Dahmer can be saved. And I think that, you know, any one of those positions, you know, you're going to find an audience that will take up that song with you. I do believe that people can be saved. And I think it comes down to repentance, but I don't know anybody's heart. I would incline towards those who say, well, you'll tell by somebody's fruit. I'm watching a movie, right? I'm not watching Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know what Jeffrey Dahmer did or didn't do, or if that scene happened the way they portrayed it or not. But the way those filmmakers want you to see it, the two in the set, because that frame, the picture is framed very intentionally. There's sort of a long focus on the guy that's sitting behind him to the right. He's the one you can hear singing. And there is a long focus on the one that is sitting behind him and to the left, and that's the attacker. And then Dahmer comes into focus in two different, because they switch from one to the other. And of course, Dahmer being, you know, the center of that scene, that shot. But neither he nor the one sitting to his left, behind him to the left, who's the attacker, neither one of them are singing. But one is contemplating. At least that's the appearance that Jeffrey Dahmer has on his face.
Yeah.
He's thinking. The other is plotting.
Yeah, he's waiting.
He's waiting just for that one opportunity and that just that chance to happen. And, you know, I thought it was a well-framed shot. I think from the purpose of telling a story, I think it conveys the idea that terrible people have their own set of justification for being less terrible than someone else, and they're willing to go to whatever degree of violence to justify their own position. So is he engaging in jailhouse? I'm sure there's a part of that for lots of people. There was that for me. I got saved in jail, and it took me a while to clean up my mouth, right? Stop smoking cigarettes and, you know, quit cursing and doing all kinds of other stuff. You know, you smoking cigarettes up until Bible study, and then you don't smoke any because you can't smoke any at Bible study, and then coming back and, you know, lighting them back up.
Yeah.
But it took me that introspection to think about, what do I really want in my life? And based on the filmmaker's portrayal, one could make the argument that Dahmer was considering what his next steps would be.
Yeah. And, it's common knowledge among inmates that religious services are ways to escape the mundane routine of prison life.
Sure.
Religious services are a place to hook up, to buy drugs, sell drugs, plot and scheme, things like that, right? Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was viciously stabbed in the neck by a Cuban inmate. This reminds us just how dangerous and awful the atmosphere behind bars is and can be, right? It reminds us that in prison, and sadly outside of prison, individuals are not truly safe even in the house of God. This brutal event reminds us that when you murder, dismember, and consume individuals, retribution or vengeance will find you when and where you least expect it.
Yeah.
Right? They're dangerous places.
Dangerous places to be. I mean, it ain't good, but it ain't bad, right?
I agree. Yeah. Because at least he's, a lot of people, I've heard of testimonies of inmates that go to the chapel so they can conduct these, business meetings
Absolutely.
with gang activity and so forth, sure. Because it's a quiet place. It's a peaceful place. It's a sanctuary. And like, that's what the
Literally.
church is supposed to be. And many of those people, in time, with God's grace and God's help, they will slowly but surely move towards Calvary as well.
That is the earnest hope. Absolutely.
Now, the perpetrator's reasoning for stabbing Jeffrey Dahmer is said. He says in the film that he didn't belong. He didn't belong in the church. He didn't belong. It wasn't right for him to receive Christ's grace. It wasn't necessarily right for him to even receive Christ's salvation. But you know what? I did some research this week on, the Milwaukee cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer, and I looked at it. And but it's almost unfathomable. It is unfathomable when you realize the extent of the crimes, the darkness, the evil. And when you weigh and examine the complexities of the crimes, if a person is honest with themselves, at least to some degree, the inmate that stabs him in the neck, like, he has a point. But many in evangelical churches, just like the inmate who stabs him in the neck with a toothbrush, many in evangelical circles, we like to pick and choose who should receive God's grace and who should receive God's love as well. Do pedophiles, do they deserve the grace of God? Do rapists deserve the grace of God, the love of God? Murderers? Maybe it may not be that dark. Maybe it's politicians, right? Matthew the tax collector. Maybe it's law enforcement. Maybe it's the unhoused. Maybe it's the drug addict, the felon, the alcoholic. Maybe it's even different ethnicities or those of a lower social status. Do they belong in church? Do people want them in church? Or do they feel like this is their church and they don't want, and you don't deserve to be here? So how do you feel about some of those ideas and thoughts?
Well, there's a lot there. I think it's important to realize that any sort of government entity that is in the position to impose a sentence has an obligation to ensure that that person can complete their sentence, right? The law has its own remedy, right? That's a saying in the legal system. And the law has its own remedy, simply put, means this: for this kind of crime, there is this kind of sentence. But that sentence comes with the expectation that a person is going to be able to complete their sentence without someone else acting in an extrajudicial capacity as a judge, jury, and executioner, as was the attempt in this. The guy saying, you don't belong in here.
Right.
And part of that is true. Like, there's no reason that a person charged with those kinds of crimes would be in any sort of general population setting, because the likelihood that they're going to complete their sentence is really, really slim. Even if they are in a specialty housing unit, that houses inmates of similar crime, right? The risk of someone like that not being able to complete their sentence is just really, really high. I was moved by, again, just the cinematography.
Yeah.
We're looking at pop culture stuff. So you have the one inmate who's behind him, who has this malicious intent in church, using it as an opportunity, comes up, stabs him in the neck. That, one poke is what we see. The guards move in. Dahmer's holding his neck. And you see the juxtaposition. An inmate who is charged with crimes, convicted of a crime, who is serving time alongside Dahmer, has this harsh hand, and the officer who is then charged with the duty to make sure they are providing a safe space for an inmate to serve their time. There was almost a gentleness with which you could see his hand covering and applying
the
pressure
laceration
to the wound. Yeah, the shot was very, very intentional. And, we have an obligation to not take lives if we are believers in Christ. That is
right. Absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking about that. You can see these at Cisco V. Walker Music and More. We're going to be doing some of these. The next set, we're going to talk about The Whale, the Brandon Fraser movie. We're going to be kind of looking at how Christianity is seen in pop culture. And today we have looked at Dahmer, Prison Chapel Retribution. So thank you, and keep watching. Leave a comment if you like. God bless you. All right, now we just do the other one. All right, you got to watch this one.
Yeah, we can clip all this stuff out.
Here, this is one more. They're good clips, huh?
They're great clips.
I like the grandma.